A 17-year-old billionaire's son was about to lose everything. Not his money, not his mansion, something far more valuable. And the only person who could save him was a 12-year-old girl whose mother cleaned his floors. She had a secret, a way of seeing the world that most people never learn. Her grandmother, a nurse who had saved countless lives, had whispered it to her before she died. Now, she was about to use that secret to save a boy who was drowning in gold, to expose a truth that would shake a billion-dollar empire, and to teach us all something we desperately need to remember. This is their story, and I promise you, by the end, you'll never look at the world the same way again. Stay with me. Welcome to Voice of Granny. While you are here, please hit the subscribe button and comment your view on the story and where you're watching from. Let me tell you about a boy who had everything, and yet had nothing at all. His name was Daniel Reed, and he lived in a mansion overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Southern California. The kind of place you see in movies, with glass walls and infinity pools that seem to spill right into the sea. His father, Richard Reed, owned one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. They made medicines that saved lives, that healed the sick. It was a noble business built on a fortune worth billions. But Daniel was drowning. At 17 years old, he was failing every single class. Not because he couldn't learn. No, the teachers all said the same thing. He just wouldn't try. He had private tutors who flew in from universities. They'd quit after a few weeks, frustrated and defeated. He had access to every resource imaginable, and he used none of it. You see, when you're born with everything already decided for you, when your future is written before you can even read, something inside you just stops. Why try when it doesn't matter? Why care when the ending is already known? I want you to imagine Daniel sitting at breakfast one morning. The sun is streaming through those massive windows, painting everything gold. In front of him is a plate of food prepared by a professional chef. Eggs cooked perfectly. Toast made from bread baked fresh that morning. But he's just staring at it, feeling absolutely nothing. Across the table sits his father. Richard Reed is the kind of man who fills a room just by being in it. Tall, sharp-eyed, always dressed like he's about to attend a board meeting. Which, honestly, he usually is. He's looking at his tablet, checking stock prices, reviewing reports. He hasn't looked at his son once. Then his father speaks. His voice is cold, controlled. The school called again, Daniel. Another failing grade. History this time. How is that even possible? Our family's name is literally in the history books of this state. Daniel just shrugs. He's heard this speech before. Different words, same disappointment. Do you know what your grandfather did? His father continues, his voice getting harder. He came to this country with nothing. He worked in factories. He saved every penny. He built something from dust. And you, with every advantage in the world, can't even pass a simple test. It's boring, Daniel mutters. Boring. His father repeats the word like it tastes bitter. Your future is boring to you. Fine. Then let me make it more interesting. And that's when his father takes away his phone, his car keys, his credit cards, everything. Just like that, the prince becomes a pauper. Well, not really. But in his world, having to ride the public bus to school might as well be exile. Maybe, his father says, standing up to leave, maybe when you have nothing, you'll finally understand the value of something. The door closes behind him. Daniel sits there alone at that huge table, in that beautiful house, and he feels smaller than he's ever felt in his life. The next few weeks are brutal. You have to understand, at his school, a private academy where tuition costs more than most people make in a year, Daniel is known for two things: his last name and his spectacular failures. Now he's also known as the rich kid who has to take the bus. His so-called friends mock him mercilessly. Kyle Harrison, whose father runs a competing pharmaceutical company, makes sure everyone knows. Look at Reed, finally seeing how the other half lives. How's public transportation, Daniel? Did you remember to bring exact change? The laughter follows him down the hallways like a shadow he can't shake. But something strange starts happening. When you lose your phone, when you lose your car, when you lose all your distractions, you're left with something terrifying: yourself. And silence. And time. Daniel starts noticing things he never noticed before. On the bus, he sees a woman with 3 young children, counting change in her hand, her face tight with worry. He sees 2 teenage boys in the back who laugh too loud, trying to cover up something painful underneath. He sees people. Really sees them for the first time. At school, he sits in his classes and for once, he doesn't tune out immediately. He listens. In English literature, the teacher is talking about a poem, and Daniel catches himself actually wondering what the poet meant. What were they feeling when they wrote those words? It doesn't last long. His old habits are too strong. But there's a crack now. A tiny opening in the wall he's built around himself. One evening, he comes home to the empty mansion. The staff moves quietly through the rooms like ghosts. He wanders, feeling lost in his own house, and finds himself in the conservatory, a glass room filled with plants and flowers. His father had hired a gardener years ago to maintain it, though Richard never actually spends time there. And that's where Daniel sees her. A young girl, maybe 12 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a braid. She's sitting cross-legged on the floor between the plants, and she's drawing. Not just doodling, but carefully, meticulously sketching a small flower in a pot. She's so focused she doesn't even notice him standing there. He recognizes her vaguely. She's the daughter of Lucia Torres, the head gardener. Lucia has worked for the Reed family for about a year now. She's a quiet, hard-working woman who sometimes brings her daughter with her after school. Daniel watches the girl for a moment. There's something about the way she's looking at that flower. Like she's seeing something he can't see. Like it's telling her secrets. "What are you drawing?" he finally asks. She looks up. Her eyes are dark, intelligent, completely unimpressed by him. "A flower," she says simply. And somehow Daniel knows his life is about to change. Her name was Rosa Torres, and she looked at him like she could see right through all his expensive clothes down to something true underneath. "I know it's a flower," Daniel said, feeling oddly defensive. "But why are you drawing it?" Rosa tilted her head, considering him. "Because no one really looks at flowers. They just glance and say, 'Oh, that's pretty,' and move on. But if you really look, really see, every petal tells a story." She held up her sketchbook. The drawing was remarkably detailed. She'd captured not just the shape of the flower, but the way one petal curled slightly inward, the small imperfection on a leaf, the way the light hit the stem. "See this?" She pointed to a dark spot on one of the petals. "This flower got damaged somehow. Maybe someone touched it too roughly. But it didn't stop growing. It just grew around the hurt." That's not something you see with a quick look. Daniel stared at the drawing, then at the actual flower. He had walked past that plant 100 times and never really looked at it once. "My grandmother taught me that," Rosa continued, closing her sketchbook. "She used to say that most people go through life blind. They have eyes, but they don't see. They have ears, but they don't hear. They're walking through the world asleep." "Your grandmother sounds wise," Daniel said, sitting down on the floor across from her. He wasn't sure why, but he wanted to keep talking to this strange, serious girl. "She was," Rosa said, and there was a weight to those words. "She passed away 2 years ago. She was a nurse for 40 years. She worked in the emergency room, saw terrible things, saved lives. She used to tell me stories." Rosa's eyes got distant, like she was seeing something far away. "She said that in the emergency room, you learn to see what others miss. A small bruise that tells you about a bigger problem. The way someone holds their body that shows you where the real pain is. She said the best doctors aren't the ones with the most knowledge. They're the ones who know how to look." Daniel felt something stir inside him. A curiosity he hadn't felt in years. Can you teach me that? How to see like that?" Rosa studied him for a long moment. "Why do you want to learn?" It was a simple question, but it hit him hard. Why did he want to learn? The honest answer came tumbling out before he could stop it. "Because I'm failing everything. Because my father thinks I'm worthless. Because I look at the world and I feel nothing. And I'm scared that this is all there is. That I'm just going to be empty forever." His voice cracked on that last word. He hadn't meant to be so honest. But something about Rosa made him want to tell the truth. She nodded slowly, like this made sense to her. "Okay, I'll teach you what my grandmother taught me. But there are rules." "Anything," Daniel said quickly. Rosa held up one finger. "First rule, you have to forget everything you think you know. Your school, your father, your money, none of it matters here. We start from zero." She held up a second finger. "Second rule, you do exactly what I say, even if it seems pointless or strange. Every lesson has a reason." She held up a third finger, and her face became very serious. "Third rule, you have to leave your pride at the door. Pride is what's blinding you. It's heavy and useless, and it's in your way. If you can't let it go, we stop right here." Daniel looked at this 12-year-old girl who spoke like someone 3 times her age. He thought about his failing grades, his father's disappointment, the emptiness that filled every day. He thought about the woman on the bus counting her change, the flower growing around its damage. Okay, he whispered. I agree. Rosa smiled for the first time. It transformed her whole face. Good. Tomorrow morning before school. Meet me in the garden at sunrise. Don't be late. The next morning, Daniel dragged himself out of bed while it was still dark. He stumbled out to the garden, the grass wet with dew, the air cool and sharp. Rosa was already there, standing under an old oak tree that grew at the edge of the property. She didn't say good morning. She just pointed at the ground. Tell me what you see. Daniel looked down. He saw grass. Dirt. Some scattered leaves. I see grass. Look again, Rosa said. Don't just glance. Really look. He sighed but crouched down, staring at the patch of ground. At first, it was just grass and dirt. But as he kept looking, things started to emerge. An ant carrying a crumb 3 times its size, struggling over a pebble like it was climbing a mountain. A spider web strung between 2 blades of grass, covered in tiny drops of dew that caught the early light like diamonds. A small purple wildflower, so tiny he would have crushed it without even noticing if he'd been walking. He watched the ant for a full minute. It kept trying to get over that pebble, falling back, trying again. It never gave up. It never complained. It just kept working. It's not just grass, Daniel said slowly, feeling something open up inside his chest. It's a whole world. There's life everywhere. Struggle and beauty and purpose. When he looked up, Rosa was smiling again. Now you're starting to see. Over the next week, she took him on the strangest lessons of his life. She brought him to the kitchen when the morning staff was preparing breakfast. Close your eyes, she instructed. Just listen. At first, all he heard was noise. Pots clanging, water running, someone chopping vegetables. But Rosa whispered, listen to the story. So he listened deeper. He heard the steady, confident rhythm of the head chef's knife. He heard the nervous, uneven chopping of someone newer, someone still learning. He heard someone humming softly while they worked, a sound of contentment. He heard the hiss of something burning, followed by a quiet curse. The kitchen is stressed today, Daniel said, his eyes still closed. Something important is happening. The head chef is confident, but the others are nervous. Someone is new and scared of making mistakes. When he opened his eyes, Rosa was nodding. There's a dinner party tonight. Important guests. You heard the pressure, the fear, the hope. You heard what words couldn't tell you. This became their routine. Every morning before school, every evening after. Rosa teaching him to see. Not just with his eyes, but with everything. And slowly, impossibly, Daniel started to wake up. The change didn't happen overnight. It was gradual, like watching the sun rise. You don't see it moving, but suddenly the world is bright and you realize everything is different. Daniel started applying what Rosa taught him to his classes. In history, the teacher was lecturing about the Industrial Revolution. Before, he would have heard boring dates and facts. Now, he listened differently. The teacher showed a photograph of factory workers from the 1900s. Tired faces, dirty clothes, children who should have been playing but were instead standing in front of dangerous machinery. A student named Kyle, the same one who mocked Daniel about the bus, laughed. They look miserable. Why didn't they just quit and find better jobs? The old Daniel would have stayed silent. Or worse, laughed along. But something had changed. He raised his hand. The teacher looked shocked. Daniel hadn't raised his hand all year. Yes, Daniel? They couldn't just quit, Daniel said, his voice steady. Look at their hands. Those are the hands of people who've worked their whole lives. Look at that woman in the front. She's not looking at the camera. She's looking at the child next to her. Maybe her daughter. And you can see in her eyes that she knows this is her daughter's future too. They didn't stay because they wanted to. They stayed because they had no choice. Because their children needed to eat. The classroom went silent. Even Kyle had nothing to say. The teacher stared at Daniel like he was seeing him for the first time. That, the teacher said softly, is exactly right. That's exactly the kind of analysis I've been hoping to hear. Daniel felt something warm spread through his chest. It wasn't pride. It was something better. It was connection. Understanding. He had seen something true, and others had seen it too. His grades started to change. An F became a D. A D became a C. It was slow, hard work. He stayed late in the library. He asked questions. For the first time in his life, he was actually trying. But the most important lesson Rosa taught him happened about a month into their work together. She took him to his father's office. Daniel hesitated at the door. We shouldn't be in here. Your father is in New York for 2 days, Rosa said. We're not going to touch anything. We're just going to look. The office was impressive. Dark wood leather chairs, walls covered with awards and photographs. Pictures of Richard Reed shaking hands with politicians, with celebrities, with other powerful men. What do you see? Rosa asked. I see my father's success, Daniel said. All the things he's accomplished that I never will. That's your pride talking, Rosa said gently. That's you looking in a mirror. I want you to look through a window. Look at him, not at yourself. She walked over to a photograph tucked away on a bookshelf. It showed a much younger Richard Reed, maybe in his 20s, standing outside a small, rundown building. He was holding a sign that read Reed Pharmaceutical Research, opening soon. He looked thin, exhausted, but his eyes were burning with determination. This was his first office, Rosa said quietly. My mother told me about it. He worked 18-hour days. He slept on a cot in the back room. He poured everything he had into building something that mattered. She pointed to another photo, older and faded. It showed a stern-looking man in work clothes standing next to a young boy. The boy was Richard. He was holding a report card, looking up at the man with an expression that made Daniel's heart hurt. Fear and desperate hope mixed together. That was your grandfather, Rosa continued. My mother said he was a hard man. He believed love had to be earned, that you were only worthy if you succeeded. He taught your father that approval was something you had to fight for every single day. Daniel stared at the photos. He had seen them 1,000 times, but he had never really looked. Now he saw something different. Not a powerful CEO, but a scared boy who became a driven man. A man who didn't know how to show love because he had never been shown it freely. He's not disappointed in you because he hates you, Rosa said softly. He's terrified for you because the only way he knows how to show he cares is to push. It's the only language he speaks. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. All the anger he had carried for so long started to dissolve, replaced by something more complicated. Sadness, understanding, even compassion. That evening, his father came home earlier than expected. He walked past Daniel in the hallway without a word, his face tired and drawn. The old Daniel would have felt angry, would have let him pass in cold silence. The new Daniel took a breath and said, Dad? Richard stopped and turned, his expression guarded. What is it, Daniel? I have calls to make. I saw that old picture. The one of you at your first office. Daniel's heart was pounding. It must have been really hard, starting with nothing like that. His father's face went through several emotions. Suspicion, confusion, and then, just for a moment, something soft. Something vulnerable. It was a different time, Richard said, his voice rough. I did what I had to do. He looked like he wanted to say more. The words were right there, hovering in the air between them. But years of habit were too strong. He just nodded and walked away. It wasn't a breakthrough. It wasn't a movie moment with hugs and tears. But it was something. It was a door opening just a crack. And for the first time, Daniel felt like maybe, just maybe, there was hope. He found Rosa in the conservatory later. Thank you, he said, for showing me how to see him differently. She looked up from the plant she was tending. My grandmother used to say that anger is just love with nowhere to go. You've been angry because you loved him and thought he didn't love you back. But he does. He just doesn't know how to show it. Daniel sat down next to her. How did you get so wise? Rosa smiled. I'm not wise. I just pay attention. And I had a grandmother who taught me that the world makes more sense when you look for the why behind the what. And in that moment, sitting in the conservatory with the gardener's daughter, Daniel felt more at peace than he had in years. 3 weeks before final exams, Daniel was called into the guidance counselor's office. Mrs. Patterson was a kind woman with warm eyes who had tried for 2 years to reach him. Daniel, she said, folding her hands on her desk. His file was open in front of her, thick with failure. I have to be honest with you. Your grades have improved, which is remarkable. But you're still at risk of not graduating. These final exams will determine everything. I know, Daniel said. And for the first time, he actually cared. What changed? Mrs. Patterson asked gently. A month ago, you didn't seem to care about anything. Now you're asking questions in class, turning in work. What happened? Daniel thought about Rosa in the garden, about the ant carrying the crumb, about his father's photograph. I learned how to see, he said simply. Mrs. Patterson smiled, though she didn't quite understand. Well, keep seeing. Whatever you're doing, it's working. Daniel threw himself into studying like never before. But he didn't study the way he had before, trying to memorize facts without understanding them. He studied the way Rosa had taught him, by finding connections, by asking why, by looking for the story behind the information. He created a huge chart in his room, connecting everything. The Industrial Revolution wasn't just about factories and inventions. It was about people desperate for work, about families torn apart, about the science of steam engines and the literature that came from that pain. Everything was connected. The night before his first exam, Rosa found him in the library, surrounded by books and notes. She sat down across from him. "You're ready," she said. "I don't know if I am," Daniel admitted. "There's so much I don't know." "You know enough," Rosa said. "But more importantly, you know how to think now. You know how to see. That's what really matters." She pulled out her grandmother's old journal, the one she had shown him weeks ago. "My grandmother wrote this during her years in the emergency room." "Want to hear something?" Daniel nodded. Rosa opened to a marked page and read. "Today a man came in with a broken arm. Simple break, clean, would heal fine. But I saw how his wife stayed far away from him. How she flinched when he moved suddenly. How their son had bruises that were too regular to be accidents. The break wasn't the real injury. I called social services. Sometimes healing means seeing what others miss." She closed the journal. "You know what my grandmother taught me? She taught me that the most important gift you can give the world is to see what's really there. Not what's easy to see. Not what people want you to see. But what's true." "Why me, Rosa?" Daniel asked suddenly. "Why did you decide to help me?" Rosa was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but serious. "Because my grandmother also taught me that you can't fix a broken system by just being angry at it. You have to teach the next generation to see differently. You have to help the ones who have power learn to use it for something good." The exams came. Daniel sat down for his history test, his hands steady, his mind clear. The essay question was about the Great Depression. The old Daniel would have panicked. The new Daniel saw the connections immediately. He wrote about economics, yes, but also about psychology. About how fear spreads faster than facts. He wrote about the Dust Bowl and migration patterns. About the songs and photographs that came from that suffering. About how literature and art preserve human dignity, even in the darkest times. He was the last one to finish. When he handed in his paper, the teacher looked at him with something like amazement. One by one, he took his exams. English literature. Science. Economics. Each time, he didn't just answer the questions. He told the story behind them. He showed the connections. When it was over, he felt exhausted but alive. He had given everything he had. Win or lose, he had finally truly tried. The results came a week later. His father received them first, of course. Daniel was called to the office, his heart pounding. Richard Reed was sitting behind his desk, a paper in his hand. His face was unreadable. "The school sent your final grades," he said coldly. Daniel's stomach dropped. Here it comes. The disappointment. The anger. His father slid the paper across the desk. Daniel picked it up with shaking hands. History, B+ English, B Economics, C+ Science, B. He had passed. He had passed everything. His GPA had jumped from 0.9 to 2.7 in a single semester. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was real. Daniel looked up at his father, expecting. What? Pride? Approval? A smile? Instead, his father's face was hard as stone. "It's impossible," Richard said, his voice dangerous. "No student improves this much this fast. You cheated. I don't know how, but I know you did." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. After everything. After all the work, the growth, the honest effort. His father thought it was a lie. "I didn't cheat," Daniel said, his voice barely a whisper. "Don't lie to me," Richard snapped. "I will not have a cheater in this family. I've tolerated your laziness, but this is worse. To pretend you've changed when really you just found a better way to lie." All of Daniel's old anger came roaring back. But then he remembered Rosa's lessons. He remembered the photograph of the scared boy with the report card. He remembered that anger is just love with nowhere to go. He stood up, his voice calm and clear. "You're wrong, Dad. I did the work. I earned these grades. And you know what? I don't need you to believe me. I did this for myself, not for you. I'm not a line item in your company report. I'm your son, and I'm done trying to prove my worth to someone who's too scared to admit he might be wrong." He walked out, leaving his father speechless. And that's when everything fell apart in the best possible way. Daniel found Rosa in the garden that evening. She was sitting under the oak tree with her mother, Lucia. Both of them looked worried. "He didn't believe me," Daniel said, sitting down heavily on the grass. I finally did something real, and he thinks I cheated." Lucia Torres looked at her daughter, and something silent passed between them. Then she turned to Daniel, her kind face lined with worry. "There's something we need to tell you," Lucia said quietly. "Something about why we came to work here. Why Rosa wanted to help you." Daniel felt a cold sense of dread. "What do you mean?" Rosa took a deep breath. "My uncle, my mother's brother, his name is Miguel Torres. He worked for your father's company for 15 years. He was a research scientist, one of the best. He helped develop 3 of the medicines your company still sells. 3 years ago," Lucia continued, her voice shaking slightly, "there was a problem. A medication had bad side effects that weren't caught in early testing. People got sick. Your father needed someone to blame, someone to fire publicly to show the company was taking action. He chose my uncle," Rosa said. "He said Miguel had falsified data, that he had cut corners in the research. It wasn't true. My uncle was careful, thorough. He would never risk people's lives. But your father needed a scapegoat, and Miguel was convenient." Daniel felt like the ground was falling away beneath him. "What happened to him?" "He was destroyed," Lucia said, tears in her eyes. "No other pharmaceutical company would hire him. His reputation was ruined. We lost our house. That's why I'm working as a gardener now instead of running my own nursery like I used to. We're barely surviving." "And your grandmother?" Daniel asked Rosa, the pieces falling into place. "She died 6 months after my uncle was fired," Rosa said softly. "The stress, the shame of what happened to our family, it broke her heart. She had a stroke. But before she died, she told me something. She said that revenge wouldn't heal us. That anger would only make us just like the people who hurt us. She said the only way to fix things was to teach someone with power to see differently." "So you used me," Daniel said, feeling betrayed. "This whole time, you were just getting close to my family to show you the truth," Rosa interrupted gently. "Yes, but that doesn't mean I didn't care about helping you. Both things can be true, Daniel. I wanted justice for my family. And I also wanted to help you become someone who could see what's right." Lucia pulled out a folder, her hands trembling. "This is evidence. Emails, lab reports, records that show your father knew the testing problems came from budget cuts he ordered, not from my brother's work. But Miguel is just a scientist with no money and no power. Who would believe him against Richard Reed?" She handed the folder to Daniel. "But you have access to your father's files. You understand the science now because Rosa taught you to see connections. And most importantly, you care about what's right. We're asking you to help us. Not for revenge, just for truth." Daniel took the folder with shaking hands. This was it. The real test. Not a school exam, but a moral one. His loyalty to his father versus his debt to Rosa and her family. His old comfortable life versus doing what was right. He spent 3 days locked in his father's office when Richard was traveling. He used his father's login credentials, which he had memorized years ago. He dug through files, reports, email chains. He applied everything Rosa had taught him, looking for the story behind the story, seeing what was hidden. And he found it. A trail of decisions made not for safety, but for profit. Budget cuts ordered by his father's executive team. Warnings from scientists, including Miguel Torres, that were ignored. And then, when things went wrong, a plan to blame a single researcher rather than admit systemic failure. Miguel Torres hadn't falsified anything. He had tried to warn them. And he had been destroyed for it. Daniel's hands shook as he printed everything. He organized it into a timeline that anyone could understand. Then he walked into his father's office and placed the folder on the desk. Richard looked up, irritation on his face. "Daniel, I'm busy." "Read it," Daniel said simply. Something in his voice made Richard pause. He opened the folder. Daniel watched his father's face change as he read. Confusion became recognition. Recognition became horror. The powerful CEO mask crumbled. What was left was just a man who had made a terrible mistake. Richard's voice broke. "I was told he was responsible." The board said. "You didn't look," Daniel said quietly. "You saw what was easy to see. What was convenient. You didn't look for the truth." For the first time in Daniel's life, he saw his father cry. Not angry tears, but tears of genuine shame and regret. What happened next took months. Richard Reed didn't just apologize. He acted. He publicly cleared Miguel Torres's name. He offered him his job back with a promotion and a financial settlement that restored what the family had lost. He implemented new safety protocols in the company. He changed. It wasn't easy. The board fought him. Some people never forgave him. But he did it because his son had shown him how to see. Daniel graduated from his private school, but chose to attend public university. He studied not business, but medical ethics. He wanted to make sure what happened to Miguel Torres never happened to anyone else. On his last day before leaving for college, he found Rosa in the garden one final time. She was taller now, growing into herself. Still wise beyond her years. "Thank you," he said. "For everything." Rosa smiled. "My grandmother told me something before she died. She said, 'You can't fix the world by hating the people who broke it. You fix it by teaching their children to see.'" Daniel understood now. Rosa had saved him, yes. But in saving him, she had saved her family. She had saved others who might have been hurt by his father's blind spots. She had changed the future. "What will you do now?" Daniel asked. "Keep planting," Rosa said, looking at the garden around them. "Keep growing things. Keep teaching people to see. That's what my grandmother would want." Years later, when Daniel Reed ran his father's company, he did it differently. He hired people who had been overlooked. He listened to warnings instead of dismissing them. He looked for truth instead of convenience. And in his office, next to the photos of his father and grandfather, he kept a small framed drawing. A flower meticulously detailed, showing damage and growth intertwined. A reminder that the most important thing in life isn't what you have or what you achieve. It's learning to truly see, to look beyond the surface, to find the story behind the facts, to choose truth even when it's uncomfortable. Because sometimes the person who saves you isn't the one with power or money or status. Sometimes it's a gardener's daughter who teaches you that the greatest gift you can give the world is simply to open your eyes. And that's where our story ends. Or maybe it's where it really begins. Thank you for listening. I hope this story made you think about what you might be missing in your own life. What are you not seeing? Who have you not really looked at? Sometimes the things we need most are right in front of us. We just need to learn how to see.